Hello again. The idea that a person might be a racist and yet not exhibit any racial prejudice is a novel one in today's world. Surely displaying prejudice against those belonging to other ethnic groups is the very essence of racism. This is certainly how the case appears to many people today. Because the word racism is often used to mean both racial prejudice and also the belief in inherent differences between various ethnic groups. The two concepts, racism and racial prejudice, are for many people synonymous. How could one be an avowed racist and still be strongly opposed to any kind of racial prejudice? This is a reasonable question and one which perhaps requires a little explanation. Prejudice means no more than holding an opinion which is not based upon evidence or reason. When we talk of racial prejudice, we are suggesting hostility or dislike relating to some ethnic group, which affects how we feel about an individual belonging to that group, before we've had an opportunity to find out anything at all about him or her. Perhaps we have the idea that Jews are grasping and keen to cheat us out of our money, or that black men are aggressive and represent a physical threat to us. Racism, in the sense of thinking that different populations might be more likely to suffer from this or that type of cancer, or perhaps be shorter than people from our own country, or likely to process information less rapidly or more rapidly in their brains, is quite a different matter. Whether these things are true or not, the belief itself is not sufficient to justify any animosity to a person from any given population, simply on the grounds of skin colour, height, language, or anything else. There are a number of possible differences in the likelihood that some ethnicities might differ statistically from other groups. None of the characteristics are absolutes, they're merely probabilities. White people are more likely to develop skin cancer than black people. Conversely, black men are probably more likely to suffer from cancer of the prostate. This doesn't mean that we may say when meeting a white person, aha, here's somebody with skin cancer. That would be absurd. We may perhaps, if we know something about the age and background of the man or woman, what country they've lived in, whether they've worked outdoors and various other aspects of their life, work out roughly how likely it is that skin cancer is present or liable to be diagnosed, say, in the coming year. In precisely the same way, we cannot meet a man or woman from China and say anything with confidence about the intelligence of that individual. It would be foolish in the extreme to be introduced to a person of East Asian heritage and think to ourselves, oh, here's a person who's probably more agile mentally than I, as a white European, am likely to be. As with the case of skin cancer, the most we could do would be to gather information about how this individual earns a living, along with various other things relating to lifestyle, and then to work out a very rough figure for a possible level of intelligence. Two things will occur to any ordinary person reading the above paragraphs. The first is that no normal person conducts their life in such a way, trying to calculate the odds of somebody to whom they have just been introduced of suffering from different types of cancer or being above or below average intelligence. Why would we do such a thing? The second point would be that even if we were minded to attempt the exercise, the results would not be all that accurate. Even knowing a man or woman's occupation and life history will not really tell us how intelligent they're likely to be. We've all of us met accountants, bank clerks, teachers and plumbers who are sharp-witted and others who are a little slow on the uptake. Only by getting to know a person are we likely to be able to gauge their character and mental abilities. Setting the matter out at length in this way has been necessary to show the futility of prejudice, whether based upon race, nationality, gender or class. Denying somebody a place at university solely because of skin colour would be as absurd as offering a place to that same person for the same reason. Nobody who thought the matter through for more than a minute would wish to see black people or Chinese people refused entry to a shop or denied access to housing, say, because of their ethnicity, any more than they would like to see them targeted by the police more frequently than white people. It is necessary to state these things explicitly, obvious as they may be to most people of goodwill, to show that exhibiting racial prejudice against ethnic minorities is an entirely different and separate thing from holding a belief founded upon good and sufficient evidence that there are real and measurable differences between ethnic groups. So febrile is the atmosphere surrounding discussions in which the word racism is used that this clarification is vital. So much for the idea of racial prejudice. Let us turn now to racism. Racism, scientific racism, means acknowledging that some ethnic groups are more likely to have certain strengths or weaknesses different from those belonging to other populations. Again, it cannot be too strongly emphasized that these differences are a matter of percentages rather than absolute endowments. Children of African origin may well stand and walk sooner than the average white child of European heritage, but there are still white children who stand and walk before many black children. Some black children are delayed in their gross motor milestones, but this is less likely for black children than it is for white. The same applies to cognitive ability, tendencies towards developing cancer of the prostate, and every other likely difference. All is a matter of proportion, none are absolutes. Even if it turned out to be true that some average difference in physiological function led to different outcomes taken as an average for one population or another, that would still tell us nothing about an individual whom we met. Every individual must be taken upon his or her merits, not prejudged because perhaps 30% more of that group to which they belong might have higher IQs than another group, or perhaps an increased chance of this or that cancer, and so on. We might be able to make rough guesses if we have 1,000 Chinese people raised in Britain about how many of them will have high incomes, or on the contrary, be wholly reliant upon state benefits. But that will not enable us to make any predictions about an individual whom we meet. Prejudice of that kind is irrational and foolish, because there are virtuous and wise black people just as there are slow-witted and vicious Chinese people and foolish white ones.